So let me just talk to the coaches. When I think about coaching, I always go back to two fundamental premises: is facilitating that coachability as a craft. So my players, and these are just suggestions, they're not things that you're doing right or wrong. They're not things you have to do, but these are things that I instilled in my players. You have to get feedback from a teammate once a week. And the question is, what are two things I'm doing well? And what's the one area where you feel like I can raise my game? I stay away from the words constructive feedback. And there's always that one player raises their hand and goes, what if I hear something I don't like? I go, you're going to smile and say thanks, because you have to ask yourself, are you pushing teammates away or are you pulling them in closer by your reaction? So let me introduce you to a term that I introduced to my players, I introduced to my clients, I introduced to leaders, I introduced to coaches, and that is emotional interpretation. So if you are to say, you look terrible in that blue shirt, it doesn't calm me down, it gets my blood pressure up. And we teach something called RIAR. React, interpret, articulate, reflect. We never get to reflection. So when I react, I feel, geez, I look great in this blue shirt. My interpretation, you're being a jerk. My articulation is I tell 3 other people who tell 4 other people. Sound familiar with youth sports? When somebody doesn't play, what happens? The player tells the parents. The parents are upset. The parents talk to the other parents. The other player, the kid, actually tells 4 other players. And that starts to form an opinion of the coach. Oh, by the way, the player forgot to tell his parents and the fellow players, I was late for practice twice. And so we look for things in absolute terms, right or wrong. It's not the world we live in. So when you look at, for coaches, I always think playing time is to encourage positive feedback. I always view practice time is where we get the repetitions and the constructive element of coaching. And I have a young lady right now, 18 years old, about to coach her first boys volleyball team as a freshman in college. Kid's 4 years younger than her. She said, do you have any suggestions? I said, yeah. Always remember when you yell across that court, it's within earshot of that kid's parent. I'm not saying to avoid the tough conversation. I'm just saying that's when you praise, because then they have yet less to argue about. They have less to complain about. And so for coaches, it's tough, right? And then when I look at parents, when we see our kid not play, it's tough. I want to plant a seed with you. The greatest gift your kid can get is being a teammate, as corny as that sounds. It is also the ability to struggle. If you have not, as a parent, read this book, get the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. It stands for Guts, Resilience, Intensity, Tenacity. The greatest gift you can have for your kid is their ability to struggle and overcome that struggle. Change and challenge is tough. So grit, Angela Duckworth's research reports, the number one attribute of someone who's successful is someone who's shown passion and perseverance over a period of time where there's change and challenge. She did a study at McKinsey. She did it in the Chicago school districts, and grit was the number one determinant of someone's future success. So when we go to the coach and say, why is my kid not playing? Most of the time, parents are not asking that question. They're asking, is he going to play more? And I kind of want to position you to be a little uncomfortable so my kid gets some more playing time. You're doing your kid a disservice. In the moment, it feels so good. So I'm famous where I coach for these. I have earbuds. And people would always say, why do you wear earbuds when you coach? And I said, when my kid played freshman basketball, there was about 17 kids on the team. There was a cut, but they kept 17 kids. I knew he wasn't going to play much. My kid was a great shooter, but below average athlete. I knew his days were numbered, and I could hear the parents yelling. I could hear the parents yelling at other people's kids to get their kids out of the game. And I'm like, this is nuts. I never had that when I grew up playing. And you hear the horror stories of refs being physically attacked, and we're at an all-time low with officials in this country. And then I look at the opportunity that parents have to go watch their kids and enjoy it. and they're fighting in the stands and they're yelling at the coaches and the refs. And I share this with parents all the time. When you yell at an official, and let's say an official missed a call, and they will, by the way, you're teaching your kid, and everyone, when I first say it, argues with me. You're teaching your kid to undermine authority figures. Something went wrong against you, son or daughter. I'm going to scream for you. It's not you. Don't overcome anything. It's the ref's fault. So what happens, and I see it in the workplace all the time. People enter the workforce, and I just had a young guy at a credit union say to me, well, my boss isn't a very good boss. And I said, that's too bad. I said, so what's a good boss? He went on to tell me 5 things that the boss shouldn't do or has done that they shouldn't do. And I said, it's interesting. What was my question? Well, you wanted to know my issues with my boss. I said, no. Remember emotional interpretation? I said, what is the good boss? What should a boss do when there's conflict between 2 people? What should a boss do when the numbers aren't where they need to be and he or she's getting pressure from their boss? This kid looked at me dismayed. I said, you just said he's not a good boss. What is your criteria? Well, I don't know. I said, okay. He said, maybe I shouldn't have said something. I said, think about this. Would you say this directly to your boss? He said, well, no. I said, have you shared this with anybody else? I think I know the answer. Well, yeah, some of us have talked. I said, oh, okay. So you start rumors? What do you mean I start rumors? I said, you think your coworkers are going to represent your voice better than you? And have you given consideration or thought to how the boss would feel knowing that the team is talking behind his or her back? He said, no, obviously it's a good point. I shouldn't do it. And these are learned behaviors. So we as parents, one of the best things that we can do is go up to one of our kids' teammates who maybe even played more and praise them in front of their parents, in front of your kid. That will facilitate the groundwork for teamwork and coachability.